Welcome everyone to our latest webinar on women leading in echocardiography laboratories, challenges and solutions. And with me tonight, I have Dr. Allison Hayes, Dr. Judy Hung, who will join momentarily, and Dr. Vera Rigolin, and Dr. Marielle Scherrer-Crosbie, to discuss, and I would encourage everyone in the audience to ask questions through the Q&A, and I will be monitoring those questions. And the aim that this webinar has is to really shed light on some of the challenges, but also the positives, the opportunities and positive experiences that women face in leadership roles within the Echo Lab. And four main areas we're going to talk about to begin with. One is, what are the success stories that people have? Two, what are the challenges that women face in this leadership role? And then what strategies have they used to overcome those particular challenges? And then what is the utility of really promoting diversity and inclusion in our roles, and how that actually is an important feature of your leadership team? So without any further ado, I would like everyone to turn on their cameras. I think they already have. This is great. And let's start with the first idea, which is, could you all just tell us what have been some highlights of your leadership roles, and what have you found to be successful? And we can go in alphabetical order, say. Allison,
sure.
First.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Ritu. Thanks for having me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. I would say one of my highlights was when I first had the opportunity to be director. I was a faculty for about 9 years, and I think everyone knows Dr. Ted Abraham relocated to UCSF. He was working with the administrative echo director at the time, who I see as an attendee tonight, Sue Phillip. And they built a very strong foundation for the Echo Lab at the time when I was a junior faculty. And then I had the opportunity of working closely with them over the next 3 years after I got promoted. And then when Ted relocated, I had the opportunity to apply to be Echo Lab director. They did do a search. And I was interim for about a year, then became permanent. And I think that one of the highlights was just getting to work closely with wonderful people, including Sue Phillips, as well as the sonographers and fellows, and then sort of shaping things in the Echo Lab to be more in line with my goals and values, because there was already such a strong foundation when I started, but to kind of mold and shape things the way I wanted it to be. So I made a few changes right off the bat, and I think some of them were very successful. Not every change that I made worked, but it was really nice to see kind of what worked and what didn't with the sonographers that we had, as well as the junior faculty. And then one of my big things that was very important to me at the time was just improving diversity and including women in the Echo Lab, making everyone feel welcome, including trainees, just to kind of create a culture and environment of a very welcoming work environment, so that people could feel comfortable to grow in terms of their professional career. So I think some of that has been successful. And I would say one of the ways that I know it's been going well is just that we've had more trainees interested in pursuing echo as a career. So I think that's been going well. We've had a kind of unprecedented interest in echo. So I feel like that's one of the things I'm most proud of helping with, and I couldn't have done it without the team that I had. But I would say that's one of the highlights, is just helping other trainees and other women to sort of start their career and kind of feel welcome and comfortable as a place that you can grow your career in echo and cardiology.
That is super, and I'm sure that by your ability to help all these other women climb, it's what is the expression? Rising tides lift all boats. And I think that is a really key part of creating this positive culture that people want to be around and, be in. Let's see. Marielle?
Thank you. And thank you for organizing this webinar. I think it's such a wonderful idea. So yeah, what I've really enjoyed, my road has been a bit different. I worked at the Mass General actually with Judy Hung for a very long time, and mainly as a researcher and in the Echo Lab. And so it was a bit of a change of direction to take the direction of the Echo Lab at Penn. And it was a great opportunity. And, similarly to Allison, it was really wonderful to, to shape, the Echo Lab. Of course, you don't do that alone. You have to be in a team and be a team player and surround yourself with people who are like-minded. Something that really I have appreciated is the collegiality and the building of bridges that, come with the Echo Lab itself. Echo is really a technique that's so versatile and is so much at the crossroads of everything that, it takes really a lot of collaboration and a lot of, understanding what do the anesthesiologists want, what do the surgeons want, what do the POCUS users want. You're really at the crossroad of so many disciplines, and that's a wonderful thing. And it really, really encourages a collaborative spirit. And I think that this is what I've enjoyed the most in this position is how you're able to interact with so many different people and try all together to build something, for a strong Echo Lab.
Thank you. And Marielle, you've done incredible things, particularly with gaining some of the research things from ASC and working on your disparities of looking at, say, aortic stenosis, and really been quite a leader for all of us in terms of really pushing the field in these ways that, like you say, at crossroads at very, very different disciplines. And Vera, so our former past president, what do you think? What have been the highlights?
Well, first of all, thank you as well for organizing this, and thanks for everybody who's online, who's taking time in their evening to come spend with us. I certainly have, fortunately, have had several highlights in my career, many of them in ASE. And I think that being part of the ASC and being part of ASC leadership has given me a lot of credibility within my own institution. So I do think that being involved with societal work, such as within ASC, really has benefits in many ways, in terms of personal growth, but also it gives you a lot of credibility and a lot of leverage when trying to grow within your own institution. And I have found that my melding of my work with ASC plus what I do in my institution have really played off of each other and have complemented each other. And I do have to say that a lot of the experience that I gained within leadership roles in ASC has helped me in my leadership roles in my home institution and vice versa. And I think the most salient example of that, of course, is COVID. I know we're all sick of talking about COVID, and if I think back on it now, it's actually hard to believe what we actually went through. And sometimes I'm like, did that really happen? Right? But I would have to say that one of my proudest moments too was getting my lab through COVID. I was the lab director during the whole COVID mess, and having to shut down the lab, reschedule patients, prioritize who was going to come in for echoes and who wasn't, trying to keep everybody safe. As you remember, all the sonographers were going into patients' rooms to scan them, and people who needed TEs still needed to get done. It was a very scary time, and fortunately, that aspect of it is behind us. However, at the time, it was very real, very scary, and very chaotic. And there was no template for that before. We've never lived through a crisis like that before, and especially one where every day things were changing. So I would come up with a lab policy one day, and then the next day do a 180 and have to change the policy completely differently because new guidance had come out. And we had, I don't know, there was just so many things that came up that were not expected. Every day was a challenge, but somehow the entire lab was able to pull itself together and came out very strong at the end. And I'm proud to say that our lab, was within our hospital, was one of the fastest to reorganize and prioritize which outpatients came in, maintained our ability to take care of inpatients, and was the first subdivision in our division to come back to full speed once things reopened. And that was really based on leadership and teamwork within our lab, and a very strong group of people that really pulled together to make it work. So, sort of just to summarize, I think it takes a crisis sometimes to really prove and test what you've learned in the past, to really see how you can use the skills that you've learned to manage in a time of uncertainty. So I'm glad we survived.
So well said, Vera. And I think you really highlight how impactful your leadership is in those moments of crises to bring people together, especially when there's so much fear and there's so many people who ended up, at least in our institution, quitting. And we had major shortages of sonographers, and that continues. And it's a very difficult position to be in, to actually have to decide who has to come in for their aortic valve before the next person. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So yes, I'm glad that we've all survived that. Moving on to another aspect of leadership, which is some challenges which everyone faces. And we as women, they might be a little bit different, but in fact, they may not. And there are some universal things that we all
Ritu, not to interrupt, but Judy is here too. So I don't know if we want to bring her in on her.
Yes,
successes.
Yes. Sorry, Judy. Hi, welcome. And so, any highlights that you have had? We'd love to hear.
It's fine. Vera, I can't believe that I had this invisibility screen, I thought, and it didn't work. No, I was like, no, I have to say, I just pretty much agree with all the themes that were previously said. I mean, my highlights, I think I've just been incredibly fortunate to be part of a lab that with a long legacy of support, with sonographers and fellows and faculty, and I've tried to maintain that collegiality and legacy. So that's been it's been really wonderful to be able to have that for my career.
Yeah, and Thank you, Judy. That's and you are such an inspiration for all of us. And so just moving on to some challenges. One question actually has come up in the Q&A, which is anonymous. It just says, I sometimes feel that there is some competition among females in cardiology, power struggles. And as a junior faculty, how do you navigate this? So let's start with this question first.
I can do that. I mean, because it's I think it's important as at least division leader or section leader to be aware of this and navigate. And you know, you don't want to get in a situation where you put potentially people in competition with each other, because that's never good. But it's important to navigate that. You direct certain projects to other folks, or I mean, so I think it's good to be active about being aware of those issues, and I think you can successfully have people be collaborative rather than competitive.
Yeah, that's a great point, Judy, to mentor people and steer faculty into different areas of interest and research.
Yeah, not even different, or just areas where they're actually, it's a win-win for both of them.
Right,
you know?
Right. Did any of you have a policy of just say, for example, if there is some research coming out of your Echo lab, if there is one faculty lead, say a junior faculty, do you put everyone on the paper so everyone also benefits, or do you just say, well, you know, this is Ritu's project and she's, you know, and not do that? Because I don't know if that's a solution or a bad idea.
That's a good question. I was just going to say, yeah, I think that's a great point to bring up. I think for that issue, certainly if there's a particular area where we know junior faculty are interested, then we'll invite them to contribute to a paper. For instance, if it's in valve disease, there's certain people in the Echo Lab that have that special interest. So I'll always try to engage particular Echo Lab members, particularly who have a more academic focus, to invite them to participate, because they all have different viewpoints. And I think that adds to the diversity and enhances usually manuscripts in that sense. And then in terms of the other question, I think Judy's right that it's really important to be conscious of potential internal competition. And I completely agree that it's always a better solution to try to collaborate on things and to partner. And then just to steer people to sort of individual areas where maybe one person can take center stage in a particular area, but other people can help. And I think it's always a great idea to just have a lot of open communication, just because it's inevitable that things may come up where people may feel territorial about certain things. But as long as there's an open environment where kind of people feel accountability towards certain areas but can help on other projects, I think that usually works out really nicely. And so I think that kind of thing is difficult to control, but I think it's really, really important, like you and Judy pointed out, just to be kind of conscious and aware of it, to sort of be sensitive about things like authorship and just to have a lot of open communication. So I feel like that's worked well for our lab, at least.
I get the sense that I don't know the person obviously who asked the question, but based on the nature of the question, I'm making an assumption that this individual may be junior faculty, so may not be in a position of leadership where, you know, when you're a leader in something, you have a certain sense of control because you can control what happens in your lab to a certain extent. But it's harder if you're a junior person where really you're at the mercy of the leaders in the lab. And if you're in a lab that doesn't have the collaborative spirit that we're talking about here, it does pose a bigger challenge for that person. And, you know, in those situations, I think that really, if you're the junior person, really seeking out areas where you find expertise and that you can shine may allow you to continue to grow despite the fact that there may be competition happening around you. So finding your niche and where you can really shine. The other thing I think is important is that to lead by example, regardless if you're a leader or if you're a junior person in a not yet a leadership position, you know, regardless if there's competition and snickering around you, that you just don't just dissociate yourself from those behaviors and really lead by example and show that you can be successful by being a collaborative and a person who really can shine on their own. Judy,
So-
what do you think?
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Marielle. I think you had your hand up earlier. Anyway,
thank you. Yes, I
sorry.
put it
Yeah.
up, I put it down, I don't know. That's okay. I just wanted to add, you know, a few things, and I agree with the comments of my colleagues. You know, first of all, as a leader, it's important to look at each individual person and try to see where they will thrive best, and try to really help them develop the side that will be best suited to them. And yes, competition exists. It's actually a two-way street, because the junior person also has to try to think where they really will be at their best, and communicate that with their mentors. I think that's a very important, you know, piece of reciprocal relationship. Yes, competition does exist. As you know, as the leader of the group, it is it is sometimes difficult to prevent those, but putting people on the projects that will have the best fit with their personality and their strength, I think is an important skill to have. In terms of authorship, I know different people do different things. Certainly in my experience, being inclusive is always a good thing. When there's a limit on the authors, then it starts being a problem, of course.
Yeah, those are some great points. And I think, Judy, did you have?
I was just going to comment that, you know, there's always a period. I think it doesn't matter where you are when you're junior faculty, you're just sort of flailing around a little bit, and you know, sometimes your institution has great mentorship, but sometimes they don't, or you know, it's in and out, and it's fine. That's just normal. But that's where the ASE was so valuable for me. It just became my professional home. I met people like Vera, you know, and all those. It was just wonderful to be able to go, and it was a community because we're echo geeks, right? And that was just really invaluable to have that community.
Yes, and I would definitely put a plug for everyone who is here to, you know, get involved with ASE. In fact, two of the questions that are up are asking about how to get involved with leadership at the ASE, including the Leadership Academy, which we'll deal with in a few minutes. And I think one of the leadership roles that you all have exemplified is being self-aware. So then you can, if you, in those moments of crises or in those moments where you have to make tough decisions or even simple decisions, having that self-awareness is really key in making the right decision. I believe that. So another question that has come up from a junior person from the Stanford VA who directs the structural imaging there has asked, you know, what has been your experiences navigating motherhood and leadership positions? Like taking 2 to 3 months during maternity leave feels like you're taking 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. Are there any pearls that any of you have for navigating those you know, early years?
I'm happy
Allison?
to start.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a magic recipe. I navigated this field 3 times. And so 3 times it was 1 step forward, 2 step backwards. It is hard. There is no other way to put it. There is more accommodations now, it seems, than a few years ago, and I think we're going in the right direction. I do think that ultimately, although there is great anxiety, of course, this is a marathon. It's not a speed race, and so you do have to prioritize, you know, some important things in your life, if you can, and just proceed a little bit slower. Again, it is a very tough balance, and I don't want to minimize that. I don't know if my colleagues have other things to say.
Yeah,
Feasible,
I
but hard.
Oh, I was just gonna jump in. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ritu.
no, go ahead, Allison. Yeah.
I was just gonna, I agree with Marielle that it is challenging. There's no way to deny it. I would say from my own story, I have 2 daughters. When they were born, I was still in training and junior faculty, so I didn't have the leadership role that I do now. But I do find that was one of the most challenging points of my career. But it is the most important part. I mean, at least the most important part of my life was just being there for my children and trying to prioritize them at that point. And so I feel like I was fortunate because I had a mother-in-law who helped a lot with the childcare. I know not everyone has that, but just having a lot of family support. Also being in a dual cardiology family was also tough, just having both physicians, both spouses working. So I thought that was a very challenging part, but I got through just with the support of my husband and also my family who lived fairly close to Maryland, where I am. So I feel like that was very challenging. Later on, when I was in the leadership position I am now, the kids were a little older, so everything has been a bit easier. And I try to arrange support. I just try to plan way ahead of time to try to be there for my children when they need me, but also kind of take some of the burden off, like household chores, things like that, that I don't have time to do or don't wish to do. So I feel like that's helped me a lot, so then I can spend more quality time with my children. But it is a very challenging time. So I don't know if others have more of a story of what it's like to be a mother with small kids in a leadership position. I can imagine that must be very challenging.
I think for a lot of us, you know, there are times where you can take the leadership role, and then there are other times where you just have to take a step back. And just like Marielle said, this is a long road, it's a marathon, and really you don't need to worry so much if there are certain years of your life where I know for myself, like I could not take any leadership roles. I just couldn't manage because I had too much family responsibilities. And but that changes. And then, you know, your time changes. And I think there's time for it all, but you can't just do it at the same time. That's my feeling. So there are going to be better times in your career where you'll be able to take more of those positions that require you to spend more hours on the weekends or spend more evenings or spend more time traveling, which, you know, you can't do that with small children. So yeah, it's a constant juggling act. Judy, any others?
I think what was said is,
Yeah.
you know, all
Yeah.
those things we experience. Particularly that it's, again, it is a marathon. You don't have to get everything done, and it's okay to not take those leadership opportunities. You know, that's fine.
Yeah, it's okay. There are questions about how to get involved with the ASC leadership and Leadership Academy, and so I'm just going to throw that out at all
Oh,
of you.
that should be Vera. since she's
Yeah.
chair of it.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing up that question. You know, I'm the chair of the Leadership Academy for this particular cohort. And I do have to say it has been a fabulous experience for everyone, including me. I feel just totally lucky that I'm participating in this. I do, and having been through selection of all 3 cohorts, I would have to say that the number one reason why someone is not chosen is because they have not demonstrated enough commitment and involvement with ASE. So the role of the Leadership Academy is to build leaders of the society for the future. And obviously what you learn is going to carry over not just into ASE, but into your home institution as well. But it's really a mechanism for the society to cultivate leadership for the future of the society. So really, we want to choose people that have demonstrated a commitment to ASE, and really people who are going to be around to give back to the society everything that you learn as part of the Leadership Academy. So I think that's the number one thing that's the hardest for people to put together and really demonstrate. So how do you prepare if you are interested in the Leadership Academy? Is get involved with ASE and be as involved as possible before you actually apply. Different ways that you can get involved, obviously getting your FASE, because that is really your key to getting onto committees and moving into other leadership positions. So first getting your FASE, applying for a committee, and if you are on a committee, be active in the committee. Really take an active role, participate in the activities of the committee. If you sign up for something or say that you're going to do something, actually do it to demonstrate your interest and your commitment. And the last thing you want is to sign up for something and then not follow through with it, because that doesn't show much commitment or enthusiasm from you. And there are also micro volunteer positions. If you are not yet have enough to get your FASE, and there's information on the website, and certainly, you know, I'd be happy to talk to any of you who are interested in the Leadership Academy in more detail. If you have specific things that you're interested in, or ways that I can help you buff up your application, or at least make suggestions on how to get involved with ASE to demonstrate your interest and commitment there.
That's great, Vera. I think every year the cohort gets stronger and stronger because people are realizing how beneficial the Academy is, and in terms of professional growth and all the skills that you teach, which has been absolutely incredible. And it's great to see the ones that have gone through the program doing and giving back to ASE. They have done incredible. Next area that I wanted to discuss was, I mean, we all faced some problems and challenges. So I want to hear any strategies that you have implemented or used to overcome any of the challenges that you faced as the Echo Lab director or otherwise, as a woman in this field.
I could start. I think that's really a great question. I think it's also a very interesting question that I'm sure everyone has dealt with at some point in their career. But I would say one of the challenges that I perceived early on is sort of feeling that you need to prove yourself for a while, that you need to gain respect. And I don't know if just a perception or just a reality that a lot of women in leadership roles face, but sort of just wanting to do your best and gain the respect of your colleagues. And then learning how to lead people who've been there much longer than you. So all of a sudden you're in charge, and They're peers that are about your age, and some have been there for years, and just trying to steer them in the right direction and kind of maintain sort of leadership kind of feeling so that people can respect you and follow what you choose to do. Of course, with asking their advice the whole time. So I found that a little bit of a challenge in the beginning. I think one thing is also changing things that have been going on for a while. If you perceive that things need to go in a different direction, is sort of convincing colleagues who've been there a long time to change the way things are. So I think that's always a big challenge, not unique to women, but just leadership in general. So I found that a place at Hopkins that what really speaks to people is just people are very data driven. So if you have something you want to institute, I always find that it's very good to just present a lot of data to kind of argue why one thing would be more beneficial. As an example, would be we in our Echo Lab, we read outpatients and inpatients kind of all blended together. And I know, and people, when I first started, were going home very late just because of all the outpatients combined with the inpatients that we had to read. So then one of the things I instituted with kind of everyone's buy-in was to read the studies from yesterday on the following day in terms of the outpatients, because they didn't need to be read exactly the same day. So that just sort of improved the workflow. So then when you come in the morning, there's studies to read, and then you kind of read throughout the day, but you're not leaving at 7 or 8 p.m. anymore. But that took, people didn't like that change in the beginning, or some people weren't used to it. So it took a little bit of convincing. So I literally made graphs about what time people were going home and how this was expected to change. And then that helped win people over, and it ended up working out. But I feel like a lot of it depends on the institution you're at and kind of what speaks to people. But I feel like because people really respond to data because it's very neutral, I think that really helps to kind of navigate change in our Echo Lab.
That's brilliant, Allison. That's really great to hear.
You know, it's funny, Allison, because I was going to tell exactly the same story. We did the same thing. One obstacle, and that is not only in Echo, is the sort of tug of war of always working more with always less resources, which seems to be a common trend in many of the medical specialties. And as the director of the lab, you know, how to make this feasible. So we actually did the same as what you described, Allison. And another thing is the adaptability to change, which is tough because change is so fast and it happens all the time, it seems, and you can't really settle down in this environment. So that's a real challenge, you know, to get people to not only accept change, but accept continuous change. You know, something that was taught to us by the pandemic, which was, as Vera was describing very eloquently, such a crazy and difficult time for leadership. One of those changes is this capability of working a bit more from home sometimes, and Echo in a way is quite a wonderful specialty in that regard, in that for some of the readers you can read remotely, and so adapting, you know, one lesson that I took certainly is to be able to create some sessions that are floating sessions and that can be done remotely, and that has helped a lot for the morale of the lab. Again, in this context of always having to do more with the same amount of resources, having a more flexible, and it's not always feasible. Obviously, we have people who need to be in the lab, but on the periphery, we can have one or two persons who can be a bit more flexible. And so I think adaptability to change is a way to, you know, trying to take those opportunities that were given to us, unfortunately, by the pandemic. But that's one way of dealing with some issues.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And I'll just add to that, have you been able to navigate resources who controls the purse strings of your lab. If your staff or you are recognize that that's an important liaison, something that you know, if you need to ask for something, building those bridges, has that been something that you're able to accomplish, to help? Money helps in many situations, beyond your title. Have you had any luck with that, or has that been challenging? So just an add-on. So just something to think about.
It's been challenging in that respect, just because the financial environment now for a lot of health systems that, just like Marielle, and I'm sure others would agree, that we're doing more with the same amount of people or even less people. So for us, recruitment has been a challenge in this environment where everyone's looking to hire cardiologists and echocardiographers. So convincing the administration that we need more FTE or more help, that goes pretty straightforward, just because we base it on very kind of standard metrics and volumes that we're facing. But actually, getting more help, I feel like, is the bigger challenge. So I do feel like the leadership where I work is very open to obtaining resources to be able to give us more help that we need. And I do agree that flexibility makes a position more attractive, just like with Marielle, with more flexible work hours when possible. And I think that it is possible to some extent in Echo, as opposed to something like critical care. But I think that's a great point.
Vera or Judy?
I would just say, pretty much, I think just exactly what Allison and Marielle said. The challenge is, it's always about money, right? It's always about money and resources. And it took me a while to figure out how to ask for money. And it boils down to numbers for me. They need data. That's what that seems to be most helpful. It's not, this would be a good thing to do, or this would be great for our faculty. It's like, if you give me more money to pay bonuses, I can read more echoes X. And it took me a while to figure that out. But that seems to be very effective for the people who control the money.
Yeah.
I would say that just on a different note of challenges, I think that part of leadership requires a lot of self-reflection, as already has been mentioned. And I think, having a very realistic view of where your strengths and weaknesses are, and really trying to work with that. So I'll just use myself as an example. I am a person that tends to be more on the collaborative side and trying to get everybody to be happy and on the same page. That doesn't always work. Not everybody is always going to agree with you. Not everybody is always going to be happy with what you do. And, you have to learn not to take that personally. And that sometimes you can't always be collaborative and make everybody happy, because sometimes the situation requires that you be a little bit more of a dictator type, or that you make decisions that are good for the lab and good for the group, but maybe not necessarily good for a particular person. And that was very hard in the beginning, because I did take a lot of things very personally, but then you learn that that is part of being a leader, and that's part of the job, is that, you sometimes you have to do things that certain people may not be happy with or may not agree with, but that you're making the very best decision that you can for the good of the organization, the good of the lab, the good of the team. And fortunately, things have worked out for me, but not without a lot of angst sometimes in those decisions. The other thing I'd say is, learning your communication style and learning the style of communication of the people that you work with, and be able to adjust how you communicate with people depending on who it is that you're talking to or negotiating with. So for example, if there is a hospital leader that you need to interface with who's very direct, then when you negotiate with that individual, they're going to want a lot of data. They're going to want a very direct conversation. And if you're very wishy-washy and very floral and very different than the style that they want, you're not going to get what you want. So really learning how to communicate with people, even if the communication style is very different than what you're comfortable with, is very important in order for you to be successful in getting what you want.
Those are brilliant tips, and you know, being able to adjust and be adaptable to the person, and to anticipate what they're going to be looking for if you're asking for something, to, you know, be 2 steps ahead of them is really your best bet to get whatever it is you're asking for, mostly for money or resources for your lab. I completely agree. There was another question that is being asked, which is, how do we work to retain our echo workforce, especially sonographers? Any tricks or tips in retaining your sonographers?
That's like the $1 million question, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We are certainly facing that a lot. Well, the big thing is pay. You know, as Judy said, money talks. And I live in Chicago, where there's many different hospitals. So the competition for sonographers is fierce. Soon as we raise our salaries, the hospital down the street raises it even more. So it's really tough. But I have to say that what we're finding is that one of the biggest things is money, and we're continually doing salary surveys to make sure that our salaries are up to snuff with the rest of the city. It's tough.
Yeah, I agree totally, Vera. We had exactly the same experience, which is that we tried a whole load of things, and finally, when the hospital finally agreed after a lot of data to raise the salaries, we were able to recruit more. We did try, I mean, we do still do that, of course. There's a lot of other things that, we try to put in place, like training some students from a nearby school and trying to retain them after that. We have a sort of academic ladder for the sonographers. We try to make the job interesting. We provide feedback. We have QI. But at the end of the day, I agree with you. That's what made the most difference when the salaries were raised. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to completely agree too. We lost a lot of sonographers kind of at the end, towards the end of COVID, and it was almost exclusively because of pay. Going to either traveler sonographer companies where the pay is 2 to 3 times higher and the hospital can't even compete. And then finally, similar to Marielle's story, the hospital finally increased the salaries and were able to then recruit back a few sonographers, but it was an exodus for a little while. So I think we faced exactly what other echo labs were facing. But so I say also number one is definitely pay. So what Vera said really strikes true, which is to be proactive about doing salary surveys rather than waiting if the competition increases to try to match them. So I've noticed that that's changed at where I work, is that they're now a little bit more proactive about raising salaries and keeping them up rather than just kind of following the tide. So that's helped a lot. And then I would say the second thing is just trying to keep sonographers engaged, because as a lot of people have noticed, sometimes sonographers will be there for a few years, then move on to something else. But one thing that's important is to create like career ladders, and then to give people sort of special skills to work on, such as either 3D or strain or kind of other special niche areas, adult congenital heart disease, for instance. And then that kind of gives them each their own niche. And then it makes them feel like they have, which is actually very valuable to the Echo Lab in general, to kind of cultivate their special skills and become more engaged. And then we also encourage all of them to get involved in ASC, just ASC also helps all of us with our career. It also helps sonographers to network and then to also be engaged in the profession. So I feel like aside from pay, those are the things that help us retain sonographers.
Yeah, those are really such important points. We're still down 20%. And when you create graphs for the admins on how much they actually had to pay to bring back even sonographers, they were giving so much money, they spent so much more money actually than if they had just given them the raise in the first place or a bonus, any other challenges that any tips or tricks that anyone has been able to navigate?
One other thing that I, just talking about analyzing your personality, I guess I'm on that theme. I have to tell you that when I was the Echo Lab director for a lab for 20 years. So we're taking a long time ago when I first applied for the job. So different world, but I think that the challenges are very similar to what we have today. And obviously the individuals who were making the decision of whether or not I was qualified for the job were males. And I was initially told that I was too nice to take a leadership role. And, I'm a nice person, I have to admit, but I'm not a pushover. I can be tough when I need to be. But my basic nature is to be a nice person. And I was told that I was too nice and that wasn't going to fly to be in this role. So I really had to prove my worth by demonstrating my successes in prior leadership roles in order to be given the opportunity. And I was finally given the job and was there for 20 years. So obviously they liked what they saw, or I wouldn't have stayed there. But again, I think having had the opportunities at ASE and the leadership that I demonstrated there prove that, I had the capacity to do the job. And I also think that being a woman, as not to be stereotypical, but as a general rule, we are more level-headed and more generally caring people. And sometimes that comes across as being too nice. So really, I think that I'm not going to change who I am, but I did have to prove that despite my nature, that I could do the job. And I think that that's probably a common thing that many other women encounter, just based on the difference, the inherent differences in how we approach problems and approach people compared to male colleagues. Not that males aren't nice, I don't mean to say that by any means, but I think that sometimes there's the misconception that if you're a caring, collaborative, and inclusive person, that you don't have the capacity to be a leader because you're too nice. So I hope that I was able to dispel that myth.
You certainly have, Vera. I mean, and you changed the culture. And I think that really hits the nail on the head, because if the perception is that you have to be sort of rough and tough and mean to be a leader of an Echo Lab, that might be an old way of thinking. And the there are some implicit biases that are still present. But slowly, as you all have demonstrated, you're all different, but you can still be a good, nice person and be extremely competent and an outstanding leader. But that culture has to shift in terms of the expectation of what does that role look like? What does that person look like?
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing. I think Vera, you've said it very nicely and very very well. You do grow on the job. Even I think I'm a nice person too, and so
You are.
and so, but you learn on the job to put boundaries, and you learn because you're confronted to situations which are not, the important thing also is not to take rushed decision, not to let yourself be rushed in a decision, but you can think about it and you can determine that some behaviors are not acceptable. And then you can, again, grow on the job and you can come back and, push back. And if you need, unfortunately, to fire someone, like, it happens when you're in those roles. And, it's not pleasant, obviously, but, if you build up to it and you have, arguments and you have tried all the situations and, and everything, and so be it. So I think that you mustn't be afraid to take responsibility and a job, a position of leadership, because you will grow in it. That would be my advice.
No, I agree. And I think that the longer you do it and the more you do it, the more experience that you have and the different scenarios that you come across that challenge you, especially pushing you in a way that you're not outside of your comfort zone. It's a very uncomfortable place to be, but you actually grow quite a bit as a result of it. And so that the next time you encounter that situation, you're better prepared to be able to effectively deal with it. But I guess the point that I was making is that, despite whatever outward appearances we have and whatever our personalities are, that you are able to learn and adapt so that you can deal with really challenging situations in a mature way without, and be effective, even if you're nice.
You all could write a book on, rules, strategies on how to be a leader in the Echo Lab, because you've had so many different situations, and 70% of leadership is really about being able to handle various situations that do force you to grow in ways that you never thought you could or would. And it's much less book learning, but it's on the job experience that really hones you. So
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Vera and Marielle can write the chapter that says I'm too nice, and I'm gonna write the chapter that says I'm not nice.
Oh, somehow I don't believe that, Judy.
Yeah,
I think that you can be part of the nice club.
Bottom line is you have to be both, right?
You do.
And
You
we
have
are.
to be both.
Yeah.
You just have to be, again, it's like the communication thing. You have to learn when the opportunities are that you have to be nice, that you have to be firm, that you have to be not so nice. I mean, you really have to be able to navigate situations and adjust your approach in order to be successful. And that takes a lot of self-reflection. It takes a lot of increasing comfort with your skills. And with time, you develop more confidence and are able to pivot between those forms of leadership that are necessary.
Yeah. And I do think that all of you've pointed out that you have to draw the boundary, and so people recognize that, you know, you don't step over that boundary, and be firm about that, because you absolutely, that is necessary to manage the various personalities that you have in your lab, and you just have to do it. We are at the end of the hour. It's gone by so fast, and I feel we could keep talking because the conversation has been exquisitely wonderful. And I am so grateful for all of you for spending this time with us and having such an incredible conversation. So thank you, everyone who joined us and for asking questions. This is recorded, and anyone who'd like to hear it will be able to do so from the website. So thank you again, everyone, and have a good evening.